part two of our Danielson framework, which again is really an evaluative system used that a lot of school districts have taken bits and pieces of, taken the whole thing of, and put together. And we've been talking about it for music teachers. So today we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the classroom environment and instruction domains. We're going to look at actually two lesson activities I pulled up together and how each domain is addressed. And then if you have any ideas, if not, I'll just pull from some other ones and we could talk about the classroom environment and instruction and with a clear idea of how to address those within a lesson. So we talked about the Danielson framework, and it's also called the framework for teaching. That might be another way that you've heard it. And the four domains are planning and preparation, learning environments, learning experiences, and principled teaching. So our green and yellow, learning environments and learning experiences, are what we're jumping in today. Planning and preparation, there's lots of great things that we can do, but in terms of doing this as a group right now, I think the biggest bang for our buck is going to be those environments and experiences. And then principled teaching, you're already doing by being here, getting that professional development. So looking at our learning environments, there are 5 different tenets as part of this domain. The first one is cultivating respectful and affirming environments, fostering a culture for learning, maintaining purposeful environments, supporting positive student behavior, and organizing spaces for learning. So this is our domain 2. And last week when we talked about this, we talked about some of the main bullets, the things that we can take away. Co-creating a community within a classroom, culturally responsive ways of interaction, respectful teacher to student and student to student interactions, and a clear approach of conflict resolution. So these are 4 of the areas to focus on in that domain 2 learning environments. Oop, I skipped ahead too far. I'm going to take it one at a time. So for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a lesson. This is a lesson that I use with some of my younger students called My Aunt Came Back. And by younger, I mean I taught pre-K up through high school. So this is kind of like that upper elementary where the song is still fun, but there's some more cultural references tied in here as well. So as we're looking through this lesson, we're going to be thinking about, okay, how does this co-create a community? What are some culturally responsive ways of interaction here? How could there be some respectful teacher to student interactions? And is there a clear approach of any conflict resolution, which you're probably not going to see as much right now as we go through this, but thinking of how a conflict might come up. All right, so hopefully you're able to see my slideshow here. And I'm going to put it in present mode. There we go. And when I did that, my screen took a minute to just have a little freeze there. So I'm going to stop my video for a second and turn myself back on. Perfect. Now we can see ourselves together. So you'll notice here in the very beginning for the first slide, this is called Boardmaker. This is a visual system that I use because I work with students of all abilities. So this was something that helped provide visuals for the students in the classroom. So already we're creating an environment for success and respect of saying, okay, no matter how you communicate, I'm going to be putting in multiple ways or multiple modes, tying back if you've ever come to any of my universal design sessions, of ways for us to interact together as a community. Something else that I did is I had, again, we're talking like 5th and 6th grade students who were obsessed with all things pop culture, obsessed with, gifts and just all the fun. So I try to tie that into what I'm doing too. So if you know the song, it is a movement activity and it's a repeat after me song. So I don't expect any of you to unmute and sing, but I'm just going to go ahead and demonstrate kind of what that would look like. So the very beginning, I use this as a beat motion. So I have the students start by tapping their feet along with our boots. So we'll tap. Oh, my aunt came back from Timbuktu and she brought with her a wooden shoe, and then they're tapping along with it, right? And the other great thing here is for providing access, if we think about our instruction, they can visually see keeping the beat. So if my students couldn't keep the beat, they can visualize the beat there. They can hear it and they can see it, which is another great way. And it provides that prompt for them to be able to do so as well, to follow along. So for my students, I go through step by step. I don't add them all in together at first because that can be a little bit overwhelming. We want to take time to process and break it down. The next part here is a waving fan, and I didn't actually know who this person was, but it was somebody on a reality show that one of my students had mentioned to me. So I'm like, I'm going to tie that in there. So again, using that culturally relevant, this is somebody that's important to one of my students who watched this reality show with her mom and thought that this was an important person. So we're going to tie that in. So again, here it's modeling the fan, and then it's the repetition. Oh, my aunt came back from old Japan, and she brought with her a waving fan. So here's repetition. We're setting up that culture because I'm tying in all of those pieces of their preferences. And right now, it's a pretty respectful environment. You guys are doing a great job of demonstrating that by listening. Here too, now I've got the image of the shears. So it's promoting that visual for students. It's got the GIF, and then it's also got they can follow along in a way that's meaningful to them. That meaningful piece. They're able to communicate. So this would be the scissors. Oh, my aunt came back from old Algiers, and she brought with her a pair of shears. Just like that. Now, this one was one of my favorites. I had a student who was actually, this was kind of a tie-in. It just ended up being a perfect, obsessed with dogs, everything dogs, was non-speaking, but would say dog. Like that was one thing, and they would imitate barks. And then also, you know, you got to get some Starbucks in there. That's something that the sixth graders love, a good frappuccino. So I thought this was a perfect embodiment of tying in our classroom culture and our classroom community. So the hula hoop, we kind of hula hoop along with it. Oh, my aunt came back from Guadalupe, and she brought with her a hula hoop. And now here we've got a little rocking chair. This one actually was really hard to find a gif of. I don't know why, but so this one has no meaning outside of just somebody in a rocking chair. Oh, my aunt came back from the county fair, and she brought with her a rocking chair. And something else that I love about this song is that the first lines are quite repeated. Oh, my aunt came back is literally the same thing, and she brought with her same thing. So that visual again is prompting my students. And then here, I didn't for the sake of their identities, but I do put up a random student's face on this slide when we get to here. And then it would be their turn to come be the leader with me. So it would be, oh, my aunt came back from the city zoo, and she brought with her a nut like you. And on you, we would come up and a student's face would appear. And then we'd go back and repeat, and they would come up and be the leader with me. So that's kind of the pre-teach, the first time that we do this together. And then, of course, the student who's up there goes through it. They click the slide on you. A new student comes up, repeats. And after, 3 or 4 turns, we put the whole thing together. So we wanted to scaffold that and break it down for each student, present it in a way that they could understand. And then from there, put the whole thing together. And this part is especially fun, especially for my students who can move and have the motor abilities to be able to do so. And for those that can't, something else that we've done is I've had switches that they could hit along with the song. They could do, one part, all of the parts. It's totally up to them. Something else that I really like about the song design in itself is it does already feature a rocking chair. I had a lot of students who used wheelchairs. So this was something that they would kind of rock back and forth with their wheelchairs. They thought that was a great way to participate as well. But none of the movements are so big that students wouldn't be able to adapt this in a way that works for them. So putting the whole thing together, if you are willing and ready at home to try, we're going to put all the movements together, the whole song, and I'm going to give a count so that I will take the break as if you were responding to me here on the video. And if you're watching this later, you're going to have to just do it later and practice along with me. So we see our shoe here is keeping time for us. Oh, my aunt came back from Timbuktu, and she brought with her a wooden shoe. And then I'll say, okay, let's see what's coming next. I've got my fan. Can everybody get their fans out? Ready? Here we go. Oh, my aunt came back from old Japan, and she brought with her a waving fan. Now I've got my foot going and I've got my fan going. Let's see what's coming next. I'm going to keep adding. I'm not going to stop. Oh, we've got some scissors. Let me see those on your other hand. Oh, my aunt came back from old Algiers, and she brought with her a pair of shears. Okay, I've got my foot, I've got my hand, and I've got my scissors, and now I've got to get my hula hoop. So I'm going to go around with it. Oh, my aunt came back from Guadalupe, and she brought with her a hula hoop. Okay, I've got my foot, I've got my fan, I've got my scissors. I am hula hooping, and now I also have to rock back and forth. All right, ready? Here we go. Well, my aunt came back from the county fair, and she brought with her a rocking chair. I am going. I've got my foot tapping, my fan swinging, my rocking chair, my scissors, and my hula hoop. All right, let's keep it going one more time. Here we go. A man came back from the city zoo, and she brought with her a nut like you. And something else that I like to do at the end of this to continue to build that student to student interaction and student to student community is, if they're able, I will have them move around the room while we're going, and they'll find a partner and land on a nut like you. And then that'll be their partner that they'll transition around the room with. We've done it where it's just two partners. We've done it in a circle, almost like speed dating, where you're going around the circle and finding a partner. We've also done it where it starts with just two, and then two have to find two more, so it becomes four, and four have to find four more, so it becomes eight, until it's the whole class doing it together. Lots of different pieces. Another way that I've taught this is I've broken it up so that certain students have certain pages that they're in charge of, especially, again, thinking back to, okay, there might be, a country that a student is from. So I might tie that in there that they're proud of, and they want to talk about what they brought back or what their aunt brought back from that country. We might talk about, okay, the student really doesn't like scissors. They're afraid of scissors. So we're not going to give them that slide. We're not going to give them that piece of the song. But knowing your students and letting them have a voice and a choice in that also helps to create that environment of respect. So I'm going to go back here to our main slideshow, and we're going to talk through all of the ways in which we tied in that domain 2. So co-creating a community within the classroom. We saw that our students were doing something kind of silly that brings them together. We saw that they all had voice and choice. And we saw that there were multiple modes of learning and multiple ways to interact. That's co-creating a community. Culturally responsive ways of interaction. We saw that we used GIFs of things that students were interested in. We saw that we tied in technology. We saw that we were being culturally responsive for our students with disabilities who use visuals, for our EL students who use visuals to be able to participate. You didn't have to know the words to the song to be able to follow along. Even if you just got one big thing, the GIF showed you what to do in most cases. So that's that culturally responsive piece. The respectful teacher to student and student to student interactions is something that when you're in the classroom, we're having our own space. We're being able to interact positively. When we're working with a partner, we're not making fun of anybody else. We're partnering up as a whole class to create that inclusive community. And a clear approach of conflict resolution would be in the case that a student says, oh, I don't want to be partnered with this student. How can we clearly approach that conflict? As we're moving around the room, given different opportunities, giving them a time that, okay, we're going to take a break. You might have noticed that I cued you as we turn to the next page of, I'm still doing this, I'm still doing this, and I'm still doing this, with the visuals of myself as well as the visuals on the screen to help a student that might not know what's coming next. They might not be able to process that piece. That can help to avoid that conflict as well. So as we're looking at domain 2, this is just one activity that I would use if I were being evaluated to hit all of these pieces and get that proficient or excellent rating. Does that make sense? Yes? Awesome. So we're going to move into another lesson that's quite different on the other end of things. And we're going to look at a beatbox lesson. But first, I want to, again, preload a little bit of our domain 3 and what that means. So our domain 3 was all about learning experiences. Again, this is our instruction. Communicating about purpose and content, using questioning and discussion techniques, engaging students in learning, using assessment for learning, and responding flexibly to student needs. So especially for this 3C and 3E, that engaging students and responding flexibly to student needs, those were the two main areas that I want to focus on as we look at this activity. Of course, the way in which we present the activity is going to determine, are we communicating about the purpose and content? The way in which we assess are going to be that 3B, using questioning and discussion, as well as 3D, using assessment for learning. How do we tie that into our future lesson plans? How do we use the data is the big piece. So here it's looking for communication of purpose, use of academic language, frequent checks for understanding, scaffolded knowledge, and expectations are known. So we're going to be looking at a beatboxing lesson This is a slideshow that I put together actually during COVID when our students were learning from home to be able to provide them some independence with the work that they were doing. So this was our upper junior high and like seventh and eighth grade students. Is this going to open for me? Yes. So this was an introduction to beatboxing. This was something that my students showed that they really wanted to learn about. So we took it and we went with it. And it's a clickable interactive basically lesson that students get to do. So it lists the objectives, learn about the 3 drum types, explore how drums are used, and experiment with drum patterns. So already the expectations are known. We know what we're learning. Our objectives are listed. We're good to go. Now here it goes through, and this is our main page. So I'm not going to go through all these YouTube videos. They're wonderful YouTube videos here. You do get access to these slides, so you'll get access to this as well. But it talks about the parts of the drum set. So here, all of these are clickable, and students have the ability to click at their own pace to be able to choose their own learning. Again, giving them some of that ownership in the instruction, being flexible to student needs. If we go into the snare drum, we'll see here that there is another video that kind of talks about what the snare drum is. And then it says the snare drum is used to keep tempo. So there's that academic language. We're talking about snare drum. We're talking about tempo. Then they have that video to go with it. And then clicking this link takes them to, oh, I'm going to blank on the name. Chrome Music Lab. This is the name that I'm thinking of. And they'll get to experiment with using a drum set and using the drum set sounds. So being flexible again to student needs, instructing them in multiple modes, using that academic language, giving them visuals and giving them practice, breaking it down. And that also allows for that assessment piece. Are they able to break it down? Again, here with that clarity, here's our back button clearly labeled. You'll notice that the slides as we go through all have a similar layout, so they're predictable. The expectations are known. As we go into the bass drum, very similar slide here. The bass drum is used to mark or keep time, that use of academic language. And then it also says it typically produces lower notes, giving them something else to think of that I'm going to be assessing them on later as part of our exit slip. As we go back, same idea. The hi-hat is our 3rd drum. Here's a couple different videos so students get choices. Again, types of music it might be used in: rock, pop, jazz, and blues music. The hi-hat is a combination of 2 cymbals, and it is part of the percussion family. So tying in what might be previous knowledge, what might not be, but again, using that academic language, reinforcing academics. And then if we see some beatboxing in action, this takes students to a YouTube video to see what beatboxing would look like. And then here it says, click to answer questions about the lesson. So this is linked to a Google form that I used to test my students' knowledge. And I went anytime that there was that little speaker icon, it would share information. It would talk about what instrument keeps tempo, which one is lower pitched, and it asked those questions as part of their assessment. So it gave me an understanding of where students were at. And I was able to use that data as we went into our next lesson of what we might need to reteach, especially when we were home with COVID, thinking about, okay, are they gaining any of this? What are they watching? What are they not? What did they see? It asked them, tell me a little bit about the video that you watched for the hi-hat. What did you notice about it? What did you notice when you went into Chrome Music Lab and got to experiment with the drum? What did you see? So using that assessment piece as well. And then it gave them a little turn to practice here with our Chrome Music Lab with the rhythm specifically. And I tied it in right here. And then students, have you all seen this Chrome Music Lab? Yes, okay. Yes. So I just like to tie it in and give them the opportunity to kind of play around. And then I would also ask them, based on the drums that we see here, which one do you think is which drum? So I would, depending on the students, I would say, use the name of the drum or use the color. What do you think was the match? What do you think the orange one was? So they'd have to experiment and listen. What do you think the blue one was? Based on what we talked about, they'd have to experiment and listen. What do you think the yellow one was? So again, it's reinforcing that knowledge, giving them the opportunity to be flexible to their needs, being at home, not having access to playing instruments. How can we tie that in and be flexible with what students want to learn, with tying in that academic language and understanding the expectations? And I love, especially Chrome Music Lab, because it's so clear in the expectations for my students that might be taking a music appreciation class that have no background whatsoever. This gives even clear outlines of where our measures are, where our downbeat is, where our upbeat is. It's very clear of how that exists. And then that tie-in of why it's relevant and why we're learning this as we go back to the slides, and I'm going to go back to beatboxing in action here. It shows what all of those pieces look like as somebody is beatboxing. So it ties in. You can hear the hi-hat sound. You can hear the snare sound. You can hear the bass drum sound. And then as we go further in, I had them practice. I had them send in little videos of themselves trying to practice beatboxing. This was all part of a larger unit that we used the assessment pieces from the beginning to continue to grow and grow and grow. We used some silly sounds, so they were able to create some beatboxing using random things around the house. I had them do a scavenger hunt in their kitchen and write down 10 items, and then they had to put that into a beatboxing pattern and see if they could make that work. Lots of different pieces of especially being flexible to student needs was a big area that I wanted to focus on here. So if we go back to our Danielson framework and think about all of these pieces, the communication of the purpose, were there clear objectives? Slide 1 said yes, as I'm popping back and forth here so you can see. Slide 1 gave us our clear objectives. We're learning about the 3 drum types, we're exploring how they used, and we're experimenting with drum patterns. Something else that we've been doing is using action verbs in our objectives. So just like we would for our EL students, we have a specific verb of what we're going to be doing. And just like we would for our goals for our students with disabilities, we'd have a specific verb. We know we're going to learn, we're going to explore, and we're going to experiment. There's consistency on every slide of going to the next page and going to the back page. Everything is the same color that's clickable. The expectations are known. Using academic language. We didn't just say, oh, the high drum or the low drum, right? We talked about the drums in addition to how they are used in beatboxing. Some people might say cymbals. In beatboxing, we call it the hi-hat. Some people might call it a hi-hat, but in academic language, that's what we call it. Frequent checks for understanding along the way. Here's how we experiment. That's checking to see if we're able to play it. As we go into our assessment, there's our check for understanding right here. Here we're able to see it in action and get another idea and check, oh, is this what I thought it was? Again, here having the choice, is this what I thought it sounded like? Giving them the opportunity to check in on themselves. And then with our scaffolded knowledge, we can see here there are lots of different ways to understand what we're talking about. We've got a combination of videos, we've got visuals, we've got text, and that check for understanding. And then here again is our final video of the beatboxer themselves. And we talked about expectations already being known. So this is a very clear cut, and yes, it's a much more simple lesson, but for our students who are working independently, this is a great way to tie in that piece of instruction and put all of the pieces together with that communication of purpose, academic language, checks for understanding, scaffolding, and knowing expectations. And we can think too, back to My Aunt Came Back, a lot of these pieces are in there too. The communication of the purpose, maybe not so much about why we're doing this silly, silly song, but we used academic language. We talked about keeping the beat. We had frequent checks for understanding. We had the visual guiding us along. We used scaffolded knowledge with our visuals above our words as well as our gifts. And then our expectations are, I'm still using my hand to do my fan. That's still in there. So again, tying all of that together can create a great lesson. So thinking of, and I know we only actually have a couple minutes over here now, but thinking of some of the lessons that you've done, what are some ways that we can co-create a community in the classroom? And I know we're a small group, so if anybody wants to pop out and respond, that's fine. If not, I'll just give some examples, but I'll give you a second if you want to. So for me, it really all comes down to the voice and the choice of students to co-create a community. When I say co-create, I don't mean I am creating a community. I mean the students are part of creating the community. Something that we do pretty often is we have our like music room rules, right? Or our norms, our class norms. Having students be a part of that conversation is huge to co-creating that community. Oh, that's totally okay, Candace. No problem. So being able to create that together, voice and choice is an exceptional way to do that. That's also a culturally responsive way. It's respecting the voices and the choices of all of our students, no matter what. It's recognizing who they are and meeting them where they're at. And from there, we can have respectful teacher to student and student to student interactions. When we create a welcoming space, we're able to work with our students, and our students are able to work with each other. And when they're able to work with each other and there's a mutual respect, there's always going to be a clear approach of conflict resolution, because we know that we're presuming best intentions. We know that we all have our moments where we have these precipitating factors. We have something else going on and we can apologize and say, you know what, I'm so sorry. I overslept this morning and I missed my alarm. And when you were loud today, it really got me. And I'm sorry. It's not about you, it's about me. And being able to resolve that conflict. When we think about our communication of purpose, it's using those objectives. It's letting students know this is what we're doing today. This is what we expect. I remember the first time I was working with one of our local a cappella groups, we had a schedule and it listed, these are the measures that we're working on in this song, and this is what I'm looking for today. I would tell them when we're auditioning solos, hey, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And it doesn't mean that you're not the best if you don't get that solo. It means this is what I'm looking for. So they knew what that purpose was. They knew I was looking for somebody that was able to belt the C, that was able to keep tempo, and that was able to keep the rest of the ensemble in tune when they stepped out. Sometimes our best soloists didn't get the solo because the rest of the ensemble fell apart without them. So making sure that we communicate that purpose, using that academic language, checking in and seeing how are we doing? Are we all on the same page? Did we understand? Do we need to go back? And providing that in multiple ways allows us to have a great learning experience together. Does anybody have any questions about that? No. So I hope that you take this knowledge, and I hope if you're interested, you can take those activities with you too. My aunt came back as one of my favorite fun little ones, and just having the visuals, just the kids love it. They always love it. And we tie it in and they come up with their own countries and they come up with their own stuff that they've brought, especially if it's from their background. They'll be like, oh, I went here and I brought this. And some of them will be like, I went to Target and I got a pen. And I'm like, great, let's do it. What does that look like? And having them create the design. Or some of them will be like, well, I went to the bathroom. I'm like, oh, sure. What did you get there? A paper towel. Okay, great. What are we going to do with that? There's no wrong answer. And that, again, creating that community of just respect and trust, it's a great, great way to bring everybody together.
When
So
you do that, do you also find that your students are more able to talk about what they've learned because they have those tangible connections?
yes, absolutely. It has to be meaningful, because if they have no idea, like, especially when we're talking about using academic language in the
Right.
beatboxing lesson, you'll notice I said, like, oh, this is the lower one or this is the bigger one, and it's called the bass drum, because they don't have that background. So then they can see, oh, this is big, this is lower. They've seen videos of it. If I have it in the classroom, we'll look at it. We don't always have a bass drum in our elementary music class, but looking at those pieces gives them a little bit more of the background knowledge. But we want to make it relatable. And if it's not relatable, it can't be meaningful. And then how do we grasp that? We all relate best, we all learn best when we have a little bit of buy-in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a great question. Any other questions or thoughts? No? Okay, well, I hope you'll take this and you'll enjoy using some of these lessons. I hope that you found that our sessions together were really meaningful, talking about the Danielson framework and then looking at our domains 2 and 3 of the learning experiences and our instruction and our learning environment. I really appreciate our time together, and I know later on, like in the fall, we'll be talking a little bit more about IEPs too and how that ties into all of this. So I'd be happy to see anybody back there as well.
Elise, it's phenomenal how much you can cram in and just how relevant and easy it is to digest. And you're such a dynamic and warm presenter. We just appreciate having you as part of our community. And we thank all of you who joined us tonight, too. And hope to see you again at a PD soon with Music Constructed or with Elise in the fall. And you can watch our website at learning.musicconstructed.com. We're always updating and adding sessions there. So check it out and come see us again soon.